Not only was Mike Brown's ejection in Toronto tonight about firing up the Kings and protecting his guys, it was also voicing the frustrations of every single Sacramento Kings fan. And that energy is now powering the beam in the Sacramento skyline. You're listening to Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season long. Today, presented by Prize Picks. First-time users can receive a 100% deposit match up to $100 by using promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports reporter and producer at ABC 10 News. I'm going to do my best during this podcast not to be too loud and disrupt the workflow of all my producers and all my coworkers and friends that are just outside my office in our ABC 10 workroom, although I know I've already disrupted them with how I was yelling at my television, not just with how the Sacramento Kings came back from being 16 down in this game, not just with how De'Aaron Fox was playing out of his mind at the end of the game, but how this game was freaking officiated. My goodness, was I just as frustrated as I know all of you were, and I'm sure just as frustrated as De'Aaron Fox was. And I'm going to say this about Mike Brown. De'Aaron Fox absolutely deserves the game ball, and we're going to talk about De'Aaron Fox in a little bit. But the Kings recently introduced the defensive player of the game chain that they give to whichever player played the best defense that night. Give that freaking chain to Mike Brown for defending his guys, standing up for his guys, and saying what needed to be said to the officials. The way the Kings have been officiated this season has been so up and down, it's been so ridiculous, and I really try not to be the guy that always harps on refs, and I know I've ranted about the refs already so far this season. Hell, I had a former ref on the show to talk about officiating and the biases or lack of biases of officiating. I try not to focus on that too much, but at some point it becomes so blatantly obvious and so over-the-top ridiculous that it needs to be addressed. It needs to be talked about. And Mike Brown has gotten to that point more than a couple times. He's spoken about it very openly in post-game press conferences, and tonight he needed to go onto the floor, scream, yell, make contact with the official, which we'll talk about, and get tossed in order to get his message across. Whether it's Domantas Sabonis being called for ridiculous fouls multiple times this season. In the last two games, the 76ers game and the New York Knicks game, it was especially bad, but we know he's dealt with that all season long here with the Sacramento Kings, to how De'Aaron Fox, who's one of the most aggressive guards at attacking the basket, who is not afraid to go in, it does not shy away from contact, and yet is only getting to the line a little over 4 times a game so far in the month of December. Just got to the line a little over 4 times per game in the month of October, and only got to the line 5 times per game in the month of November. De'Aaron Fox deserves to get to the line 7-8 times a night with how physical he plays, at least when he's attacking the basket like he did tonight. And yet, Fred VanVleet can get away with literally shoving De'Aaron Fox across the court with that final attempt at the game winner that the Raptors tried to hit. Thankfully, VanVleet missed the three-pointer, and the Kings ended up winning this game 124-123. But VanVleet completely shoved De'Aaron Fox, chucked him across the floor. It wasn't even remotely close to a defensive foul or a non-call. It was a clear push-off, and VanVleet made contact with De'Aaron Fox time and time again that either there was no whistle or De'Aaron Fox was whistled for the foul. And what built up to Mike Brown being ejected was De'Aaron was called for a foul when he was shoved, and then the very next possession, VanVleet again shoves De'Aaron Fox, and then draws a foul from Harrison Barnes, which, okay, that might have been a foul on Harrison Barnes after an offensive foul from VanVleet. De'Aaron Fox was issued a technical foul quickly. Nobody really realized that happened because right after that point, Mike Brown came charging onto the floor, was issued 2 quick technicals and thrown out of the game. Let me tell you why Mike Brown did that. It wasn't about firing up his guys, and it wasn't even primarily about letting the officials know how frustrated he was at them. Mike Brown did that to protect De'Aaron Fox, because Mike Brown knew that if De'Aaron picked up his second technical, and who knows if De'Aaron was going to or not, we don't really see De'Aaron. I didn't see him, how he was acting, what he said, what his body language was like when he was issued that first technical foul. I didn't see it. So I don't know if he was on his way to his second technical or not. But Mike Brown knows that if De'Aaron gets tossed from this game, the Kings lose no matter what. It's a loss. He knows that if he's going to get this message across, if he's going to get De'Aaron Fox's message across, when De'Aaron has a clear gripe, he has to go out and be the one to do it himself. So he goes out there, he makes contact with the official, yells and screams at the official, gets his money's worth, gets thrown out of this game. The Sacramento Kings respond and win this game with De'Aaron Fox staying into the game. And I can guarantee you this, De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, and the rest of that Kings roster, they won this game for Mike Brown tonight. You best believe that Mike Brown deserves a massive assist and, like I said, the defensive player of the game chain for how he defended and stood up for his guys. That is why Mike Brown is such a beloved coach in this league. He respects players, he coaches players, and he has the players' respect because he'll have their back when he needs to. He recognizes not only does it just give the Sacramento Kings their best chance to win, to obviously have De'Aaron Fox in the game, he knows that his guy is not being treated fairly. He knows that his guy has some kind of vendetta against him or something. I'm not going to say that the officials don't like De'Aaron Fox. It sure seems like they don't like Domantas Sabonis. Regardless, he knows that his guy has a point, his guy is getting frustrated, and his guy is not being officiated properly, so he is going to take the bullet. He's going to take the fine. He is going to take maybe a suspension in order to get De'Aaron Fox's message across and defend his guy. And why do I say that Mike Brown might get a suspension? Well, if you go back and look at the moment where Brown was ejected, first and foremost, he goes from 0 on the sidelines to 100 real quick. And the reason why I believe that happened is because he saw De'Aaron pick up his first technical foul and said, you know what, I'm putting the attention on me and taking it off my point guard. But I'm sure he was already a ticking time bomb waiting to happen even before that point. But Mike Brown comes out and he goes at the initial official who teed up De'Aaron and called the foul against Harrison Barnes. He goes up to that official starts walking away. I think at this point that official had already teed up Mike Brown too. The second official comes up, stops Brown by putting his hand on Mike Brown's chest. Mike Brown continues to walk through that hand, so the official kind of puts his shoulder, turns to the side, and puts his shoulder into Mike Brown's chest. It was not a shoulder check, it wasn't anything aggressive, it was just from this to this. Mike Brown walks into that shoulder. Now at this point, all we see is the ref kind of move to the side suddenly, and we see Mike Brown's hands disappear. I think it's fair to assume, based off of the footage, and you can go back and look at it and tell me if I'm wrong, I think it's fair to assume that Mike probably had his hands around the waist hip area of the official and kind of pushed him a little bit. Clearly frustrated, clearly agitated. That was the second technical foul, and then he was ejected from that point. I don't know if the NBA is going to suspend or heavily fine Mike Brown for making contact with the officials. Typically, it's a no-nonsense policy. If any contact is made, it's a pretty serious penalty on Mike Brown. I have no idea if the referee initiating contact is going to play any effect into the situation. But regardless of the fact that there were 3 technical fouls which gave the Raptors 3 points, that almost was the difference in this game. Regardless of that or not, I didn't care. The Kings could have lost this game by 3 points or by 1 point or 2 points for all it mattered. That message needed to be sent by Mike Brown, and I love how the Kings responded to it, and I love the fact that he was not afraid to do what he had to do to get that message across. Mike Brown is my head coach, man. I love that man. Now let's talk about De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox is back, man. De'Aaron Fox, these last couple of games, I know he didn't have the best game in the loss in Philadelphia, but De'Aaron Fox looks like himself again. And Fox knew that not only did he have to step up tonight with the absence of Kevin Huerter, who was out with an injury, he was a late scratch before the game started. Well, he came into the game as a kind of a game time decision. De'Aaron knew he had to step up for that reason. He also knew he had to step up after Mike Brown had his back. And boy, did De'Aaron step up in a major way. 26 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds in 41 minutes. De'Aaron Fox played 41 minutes in this game. Domantas Sabonis played 40 minutes in this game. Your 2 best players playing 41 and 40 minutes on the second night of a back-to-back, in which both of those players played 29, 30 plus minutes in Philadelphia, if I'm not mistaken. Like, that's effort, that's heart, that's leadership that both of those guys showed. Absolute leadership. De'Aaron Fox, at one point was subbed out for a very quick breather in the fourth quarter, and the camera caught him on the bench, and he was breathing as hard as I've ever seen. Remember, this is just De'Aaron's second game back, and regardless of how good of shape De'Aaron has kept himself in and how much he was able to work with his foot injury while he missed the last couple of games, game shape is a completely different thing, right? And we could see him huffing and puffing and breathing hard with the amount of energy that he exhausted in this game. And yet, he looked like the De'Aaron Fox of old. The fact that De'Aaron, he went 4 of 8 from three-point range, but here's what I like. 8 of his 23 shots were from three-point range. Remember, we talked about in the Philadelphia pod yesterday, 7 of De'Aaron's 15 shots in that game were from three-point range. I think De'Aaron went 1 of 7 in that game. It wasn't the fact that he went 1 of 7. What bothered me was that nearly half of De'Aaron's attempts came from three-point range. De'Aaron is at his best when he is attacking the basket, getting in the teeth of the defense, hopefully drawing a foul and getting to the line, although that doesn't seem to be happening as much as it should. But even so, it opens up opportunities for his teammates. And I tweeted this out, and I'll say it again. If De'Aaron Fox remembers that nobody in this league can stay in front of him, it's game over. Because he can do whatever he wants. He can get to whatever spot he wants to on the floor, whether it's his mid-range jumper, his floater, getting to the rim for a layup, his Euro step, his step back three, which he's hitting a lot, or simply finding the passing lanes, the pick and roll with Domantas Sabonis. It does not matter. De'Aaron Fox can do everything that he wants when he has that quickness at his availability that he's been lacking over the last couple of weeks because of that foot injury. It looks like that quickness is back. And it showed in tonight's game. The fact that only 8 of his 23 shots were from deep and he hit 50% of them, that's huge from De'Aaron. But let me tell you, this was the moment of the game for me from De'Aaron Fox. In the fourth quarter, the game was close. I think it was within like 1 to 3 points or something like that. De'Aaron Fox was switched onto Pascal Siakam. It was the matchup that the Toronto Raptors won, and the Kings didn't try and double team. Thank God, because the Kings double teams are terrible. But De'Aaron had the matchup of Pascal Siakam. Pascal is way bigger and way stronger than De'Aaron Fox. So he's backing him down and trying to turn to get a look. De'Aaron is stepping in front. Arms are back. If nothing else, he's just being a presence, making life as difficult as possible on Siakam. Well, he gets a stop. Then De'Aaron gets back in transition, runs to the other end of the floor, crafty Euro step, takes some contact, finishes at the rim, no foul called, but a timeout is called, and as De'Aaron Fox is running back to the bench, he's yelling at the referee. Why? Because he has a stream of blood coming from the corner of his eye down his face, where he looked like an MMA fighter or a boxer for the rest of the game because they were rubbing the oil or everything on it, on the laceration to stop it from bleeding. Like, what does this man have to do to get a foul call? But that's beside the point. That's leadership right there from De'Aaron Fox. He's already exhausted. He just got a huge defensive stop, outmatched amongst one of the better bigs in the NBA, an all-star caliber big in Pascal Siakam. Came back the other way, hit a really tough transition layup, got elbowed in the freaking head, and still was able to finish through it. Like, that's the leadership that I want to see from De'Aaron Fox, and I'm almost just as impressed. Actually, I'll say I'm more impressed by him and what he was able to do defensively against Siakam in that possession than I was with him finishing through contact and finishing through an eye laceration or around his eye laceration at the rim on the other end of the floor. That is the growth right there of De'Aaron Fox. Got to talk about Domantas Sabonis too. Like I mentioned, he also played 40 minutes, had 21 points, 10 of 13 shooting from the field, 20 rebounds, 7 assists. Like, if this man is not an all-star, I'm calling my shot now, and I put this out on Twitter. The Sacramento Kings will have an all-star this season. They will. They absolutely will. Because Domantas Sabonis is putting up all-star numbers, and De'Aaron Fox, I know he's in a little bit of a slump right now. He'll get back to how he was playing, and if he does that, the Kings might have 2 all-stars, although that's really difficult in the Western Conference. But they're guaranteed to have 1. I'm calling my shot. I don't even care. The Kings are going to have a freaking all-star this season. And right now, if that player is Domantas Sabonis and Fox doesn't make it, that sucks for De'Aaron, because I think he is an all-star caliber player, and we've been trying very hard to get De'Aaron that all-star recognition that he deserves here in Sacramento. But look at the freaking numbers that Domantas Sabonis is putting up. Not just the ridiculous rebounds, not just flirting with the triple-double nearly every night. His efficient shooting, I mean, he's shooting like between 60 and 80% on a nightly basis. What can you do to stop Domantas Sabonis? Not to mention, like we've talked about, how important he is to the Sacramento Kings offense, the foundation of the Sacramento Kings offense, like he's quickly become here this season. Sabonis is playing like an all-star. De'Aaron Fox tonight looked like an absolute all-star. What a win by the Sacramento Kings, man. What a win by the Kings. One of the most gritty wins that I can remember in all my time covering the Kings. A lot of ups and downs, a lot of reasons to fold, especially on the second night of a back-to-back. A very difficult place to play against a really good Toronto Raptors team. Your coach gets ejected. The refs are not on your side. The game is super physical, which has been an issue for the Kings in the past. And that's where I also give credit to Domantas Sabonis, is this game was physical, and physicality has usually led to unnecessary foul trouble for Sabonis, and sometimes undeserved foul trouble, but he still didn't shy away from it. He went right at that physicality. Thankfully, he stayed out of foul trouble in this game, but he played like the ox that we know he is. I love that. And while I wasn't happy with the officiating in this game, I think the Raptors only shot 7 more free throws than the Kings did, so the discrepancy wasn't terrible. There were bad calls and bad non-calls on both sides, not just for the Sacramento Kings. I do appreciate the fact that there was a good stretch of this game in the third and fourth quarter where the officials just let them play basketball. And when that happens, good things happen for the Kings. I will talk about that more. Plus, we have to talk about Malik Monk and Terrence Davis, the big nights that they had. I want to talk a little bit about Keegan Murray. There's still a lot to come here on today's episode of Locked On Kings after I tell you about a great sponsor here of the Locked On Kings podcast. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, this episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, and Prize Picks is daily fantasy the way it was meant to be played. And instead of dealing with the hassle, especially in the NBA, of setting your lineups every single day and sometimes taking on teams that, let's say, the Kings only play 3 times, so De'Aaron Fox only plays 3 times in a week or 2 times in a week, and you're going up against a team that has LeBron James from the Lakers, and he plays 4 times in a week. Well, that's an unfair advantage that you had absolutely nothing to do with. Things like that, plus taking on the sharks of these online fantasy sites, are all reasons to maybe not like NBA fantasy or daily fantasy that much. Prize Picks has the solution for you. In my opinion, it's the best way to play daily fantasy. The way it works is you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they will go and score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. You pick the players you want. Their set over-unders are already there for you, so you can purposely pick the ones that you like or don't like depending upon matchups. And like I said, win 25 times your money. You're not competing against any other people. It's just you versus the Prize Picks projections. And Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch, including the NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college soccer, WNBA, esports, NASCAR, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, tennis, boxing, disc golf, Euro basketball. I can go on and on. They offer so much there for you, and entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer safe and fast withdrawals, so when you win and make money, you can get that money really, really quickly and safely. And on top of that, it's currently operational in over 30 states and in Canada. So if you want to sign up, if you want to play, here's even more incentive for you. First-time users, sign up, use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get 100% instant deposit match up to $100, meaning you deposit $100, you get $100 free. You deposit $50, you get $50 free. No questions asked. It is that easy to make money right away now. And then you use that money to make even more money with your Kings, NBA, or general sports knowledge on Prize Picks, the #1 way to play daily fantasy sports. I spent a lot of time on my most recent episode of Locked On Kings yesterday after the 76ers loss talking about the importance of flow for the Sacramento Kings and how teams have done a really good job, especially during this road trip, of disrupting that flow. Now, NBA officials had also done a really good job of disrupting that flow with the amount of fouls that were blown in both the 76ers and New York Knicks games. Those were 2 games that felt like they were just being played in mud or molasses. There was no rhythm to either of those games because of the amount of whistles. And the Sacramento Kings, who were down by 16 at one point, finally got their momentum going a little bit. Part of it had to do with Mike Brown getting ejected, but a lot of it had to do with just the rhythm of the game being better. Sure, there were non-calls, a lot of non-calls, and there's physicality on both ends of the floor that maybe should have been calls for both teams. But regardless, even if I wouldn't say that the game was called 50-50, I still think there were more, and this could be just my purple-tinted glasses, the Kings felt like they got more of the short end of the stick with how this game was officiated. Regardless, when the flow was good, when the officials kind of stepped aside and allowed the game to just flow and allowed there to be a good tempo and a good rhythm, it didn't just help the Sacramento Kings, it helped both teams, but that's when the Kings are at their best. They shot 17 of 46 from three-point range. Why do I bring that up? Because 37% shooting from 3, not the best for this Kings team. 47 threes, 17 of 46 threes. 46 threes, not a egregious amount of threes, not the highest number of threes we've seen the Kings take so far this season, I believe. But the Kings hitting 17 of those threes, especially when most of those makes came within the flow of the offense during those second, third, and early fourth quarter. Like, that's important to point out. But here's the big thing for me. We talked about how important ball movement is to the Sacramento Kings, right? 29 assists to just 15 turnovers. And even better than that, the Sacramento Kings had 31 fast break points in this game. And the Toronto Raptors only turned the ball over 7 times. So it wasn't like the Kings were just getting massive steals and forcing mistakes from Toronto and then getting out in transition that way. Every single time they were getting a stop, a missed Toronto Raptors shot, it was a quick outlet pass and the Kings were running in transition. Because there weren't fouls called every second, the Kings could get out and play the speed that they like to play, get into a track meet with the Raptors, who also are a good team in transition. But that was Sacramento's game. And in a lot of ways, the Sacramento Kings were allowed to play their game tonight, which is why it doesn't surprise me that the Kings were actually able to get a win. When the Kings play their brand of basketball, they're at their best. When they're forced to play kind of a slow, grinded out style, whether it's because of what other teams are doing or what the officials are calling, it really affects this team. We see how good this team is, how quickly they can develop runs, how their shots can start falling, and how they can feed off of one another. 6 players in double-figure scoring again for the Kings when there's a good rhythm, a good tempo, and a good flow. 2 of those 6 players to finish in double figures, Terrence Davis, who got the start because of Kevin Huerter's absence, and Malik Monk. Terrence Davis looked like a revenge game narrative right out of the gate. I think he had 9 points in the first quarter, hit his first 3 three-point attempts. He had finished with 19 points, 5 of 12 shooting from three-point range, also 3 rebounds. I was surprised that he only played 24 minutes and 50 seconds, so basically 25 minutes. It felt like he played more than that, and he was very impactful during that time. The reason why he didn't play more was because how good Malik Monk was in the second half of this game. Monk finished with 24 points, 6 of 13 shooting from the field, 5 of 10 from three-point range. So many of those threes were important threes after Mike Brown was ejected, and also had 3 assists. Now, that 3 assist number could absolutely be higher for Malik, and we've seen it higher on multiple occasions. But Malik really got back to his creation that we saw a lot in Sacramento, and we haven't seen much during this road trip. He was creating for others. He was not only hitting shots from the outside, but he was putting the ball on the deck. He was getting into the lane, getting to the rim, and kicking out to open teammates. That's something that the Kings have relied heavily on from Malik with that second unit at times this season. And for him to get back to that when he hasn't been doing that all road trip, I think that was very significant for Sacramento in this game. But I want to talk about Keegan Murray, because Keegan keeps doing these tiny things at the end of games, these small things that kind of go under the radar that are impactful and important for Kings wins. I've talked about it before, and I will continue to talk about it, especially in games where offensively it doesn't look like he has the best of nights, because people will brush him under the rug when he deserves recognition for doing things that rookies don't normally do. I'll point out what some of those things were in tonight's game in just a little bit. Tonight's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the #1 source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from basketball to pro football, college bowl games, the World Cup happening right now. They have it all on betonline.net. And in addition to their great prop bets and side bets and game lines and things like that, they have really, really fun live betting, to where in tonight's game, for example, when the Kings were down by 16 points, the Raptors were heavy favorites in this game. If you took the Kings at that point, you probably made a good amount of money. And there are opportunities like that in every single game you bet on for whatever opponent. The live betting ads are a really fun, unique element, and those odds are always going to be the best from BetOnline. They're the fastest and easiest way to get all that betting info that you love. And if you love sports podcasts, they have those for you as well at BetOnline. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. There have been a couple times this season where I've pointed out Keegan Murray hitting a big shot or two, right? There are a couple games come to mind, I can't remember the exact opponents, where Keegan hasn't had the best of shooting nights, but he'll hit a big three in the fourth quarter that either puts the Kings ahead or extends a lead or cuts into a deficit a little bit. Like Malik just keeps showing up and Keegan keeps showing up and doing these little important things from time to time that the Kings really rely on. In tonight's game, it was on the defensive end of the floor. With like 4 or 5 minutes left, Keegan Murray had a big steal in the paint. I think the Raptors were trying to get the ball to Pascal Siakam. Keegan knocked the ball away. It resulted in a transition opportunity for the Kings that helped them build a little bit of separation and create a little bit of momentum. Keegan had a ton of deflections and some really great defense in the second half that was instrumental to the Kings winning this game. While it wasn't overall a phenomenal defensive performance for the Sacramento Kings, defensively in a lot of ways, they were able to get this game in their favor. And like I mentioned, the Raptors only turning the ball over 7 times. The fact that one of those 7 turnovers was forced by Keegan late in this game when it really mattered, it just speaks to how much of a gamer that he is. And don't allow his stat line of 10 points and struggling offensively, 4 of 12 shooting from the field, just 4 rebounds, not the sexiest of stat lines by any means, but there are things that winning teams do and winning players do that don't show up in box scores. And the fact that you're getting that out of a rookie, even if he's an older rookie, it does not matter. When you're getting that contribution, there's a reason why Keegan Murray is on the floor at the end of close games lately. It's because he provides big plays and big moments like this without being the center of attention all the time. That's a huge boost for Sacramento, and one of the reasons why Monte McNair, I know, liked Keegan so much. So suddenly, the Kings are going into the final game of this 6-game road trip, right, in Detroit. Let's be real. The expectation is the Sacramento Kings should win that game. They are much better than the Detroit Pistons. Now, it's on the road. It's the end of a long road trip. There are a million reasons why this could be a trap game, but I expect this year's Sacramento Kings team, unlike past Kings teams, to be able to recognize that and overcome that. We don't know if Mike Brown's going to be coaching in that game or not. We'll find out more information, I'm sure, when more news comes out about his ejection. But I expect the Kings to win this game. And suddenly, you're going from heading into Toronto on a second night of a back-to-back where you were down 16 points at one point. It looked like it was guaranteed that you were going to head back to Sacramento at the end of this road trip with a losing record on that road trip, to now you handle your business in Detroit and you go from a almost guaranteed losing road trip to a goal mission accomplished 500 road trip, which if you can be 500 on the road, you're going to be a good basketball team, especially on a 6-game Eastern Conference road trip in the middle of December or at the beginning of December. You go home with that 500 road trip and are staring at not just the holidays, but 6 straight home games to get yourselves either back on track or build on top of that winning record that you already have. That's huge for these Kings. That's huge. This win fired me up. Mike Brown fired me up. De'Aaron Fox and Domantas Sabonis fired me up. And I know you're fired up as well. So let's talk. Reach out to me at MattGeorgeSack on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave your thoughts in the YouTube comment section down below. Like I mentioned, I was planning on doing a mailbag on Monday. That fell through, so I'm doing it tomorrow, Thursday. If you want to still get your questions in, you can. Leave those questions in the comment section if you're watching on YouTube, or you can send them to me on Twitter or via email, whatever is best for you. I'll compile as many questions as I can answer and answer them for you on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Kings. I'm feeling good tonight. The beam is lit. I went outside to the parking lot before I started recording, looked up in the Sacramento skyline, and it's shining brightly, and it boosts the mood, if nothing else, around this city. Hope you can see it as well. And if you don't live in Sacramento, if you ever get the opportunity to come to Sacramento and see the beam lit yourself, I hope you get the opportunity to do that. And if you do, make sure you reach out and say hi and let me know that you're here in town or you're at a Kings game at the Golden One Center. I would love to see you and chat with you in person. And thank you for listening to the podcast like you so loyally do. Appreciate you so much. Can't wait to have you join me on the next episode. Until then, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.